Thank you so much for joining us here, everybody, at Queer at Heart. And I'm your host, Mosabian. And today on the show, we have my dear friend, Chris Weigand. And sorry, did I say your last name?
Weigand, yeah.
Weigand, Chris Weigand. And Chris is here today to talk to us about his experience as a former Jehovah's Witness. We spoke.
Yeah.
How's it going, Chris?
Oh, I'm good. How are you?
And you felt the need to sort of talk about this issue, but the issue that you had being a part of the organization. Mm-hmm. At what point in your childhood did you realize, because it is different, I guess, from what you said, being a part of that as opposed to any other religion, because there's more rules put in place. So when did you realize in your life, during your childhood, that you had a different life than other kids?
I guess, definitely around the celebrations of birthdays and holidays, Christmas. That was definitely a reminder. I think the first reminder was every morning when you were not allowed to stand for the national anthem. Mm-hmm. And, of course, the teachers were aware, so I had to go out into the hallway and sit while everyone else was standing, kind of shooting me dirty looks, oh, are you disrespectful? Remembrance Day, definitely holidays. That was definitely a firm reminder, for sure.
Okay, and that was like what age? Grade 5, grade 4?
That's all the way elementary through high school, really, yeah.
And did you question it? Like, was there a pivotal moment for you where you, like, at what point did you, give me an example. So you wouldn't celebrate Christmas or any holidays because of why? What is the whole idea of not celebrating anything within the religion? Why can't you?
So, for example, for birthdays, they say that it is shown in bad light in the Bible, and that there's only, I think, 2 accounts of birthdays in the Bible, and there was beheadings and lots of bad things going on in these birthdays. So they're showing it's bad light. And for example, Halloween is satanic. Easter, they don't agree that, well, they say Jesus, the whole structure of the religion is different from normal Christianity. Normal Christianity would be believing in the Trinity, believing that Jesus is God, whereas Jehovah's Witnesses believe Jesus is the Son of God, who is Jehovah.
Okay.
So a lot of the theology behind it changes.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And so, no birthdays. You couldn't go to birthdays. I mean,
Christmas.
I think Christmas,
yeah.
You couldn't celebrate anything with other families because that was like the devil or evil or whatever it is. At what point through your, journey of being a Jehovah's Witness, and I mean, I'm sure you went to church like 3 times a week, because I remember a friend of mine, you have to go like 3 times a week, knock on doors, be on corners, do the work of Christ kind of thing, right?
So we would have Tuesday night would be our meeting night for 2 hours. We would go again. Saturday morning would be where we go do the field service. So we'd knock on people's doors for 2 hours. And then Sunday morning would be another meeting for 2 hours. So, it'd be 3 times a week. That's for sure.
3 times a week. What happened if you don't go 1 day a week? Did you have to have a good excuse?
You will definitely have to have a good excuse, I played sick a few times. I think I'm not alone in saying that. But if you stop going to meetings, then you'll be sure that you'll get a visit from the elders, and they will be questioning you, on your faith and why you are not showing up.
And that's a one-on-one meeting?
Yeah, usually they come in pairs. So, actually, my in my early teenage years, it became known that I had premarital sex. So
You did?
Yes. So
How dare you?
Oh, I'm terrible.
How dare you?
So I got a little visit from two elders, and they came and they read me the Bible and told me I was bad, slapped my wrist, and that was that, you know.
And then they just said, pray and you'll be fine.
They gave me a little guilt trip and everything, but you know, and then they what they do is actually they take away your privileges. So at these meetings, what they do is they ask for people to comment on, you know, readings. So what they do is if you do something wrong, you are not allowed to comment for an unspecified amount of time, however long they see fit.
You can't partake in the meeting.
Right, correct. You're only allowed to listen.
Jesus.
Yeah.
So it's like story time.
Taking your voice away, right?
Taking your voice away at story time. You can't even be curious about what's going on in the book.
No.
Okay. All right. And that's so. Okay. So, what is the consequence? So, okay, say you do have premarital sex. I can't even imagine what it's like to be gay. But like, actually, I do because I have friends who are former Jehovah's Witnesses who are gay. But what happens to you if you have premarital sex? What happens in the afterlife? Are you just not going to make it to heaven, or?
So basically, how the Jehovah's Witnesses, how they believe is they pretty much agree with that the least amount of sinning is the best, right? So they have different rules than typical Christianity, but basically they do believe that you could reach heaven, or what they call paradise earth, if you are not Jehovah's Witness, but you would be living in sin. And so being sinless is the path to paradise earth.
So, from what I understand, there's only like 144,000 people who do end up going to heaven.
Correct.
And I know a little bit about this.
This is a little different, yeah.
Yeah. So how are those people chosen, number one? And number two, who gets to go to a perfect earth? Is it me not being a Jehovah's Witness as well that gets to maybe go to this perfect earth?
Right. So the first one, basically, they have a memorial around Easter time for Jesus. Yet they don't celebrate Easter, but they have their own separate memorial for when Jesus died. So what they do is they have bread and wine, unfermented bread and wine, you know, the typical thing, but they do not, they pass it, and only the people who eat will go to heaven.
Got it.
So they have, God has set a certain amount, 144,000 apparently, that will eat the bread, drink the wine, and join Jesus in heaven ruling.
How are these people chosen?
They feel it themselves. You can't make this stuff up. Yeah.
So you can just say
that you feel it.
Anybody can.
And you eat the bread and you drink the wine and you are going to heaven.
Were there people part of your Kingdom Hall who claim this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I'm sure there's been lots more, probably many more than 144,000 that have already partaken.
More. So
yeah.
It's above capacity now.
Oh yeah.
You know
who's regulating this, right?
Yeah.
Jehovah, right?
Yeah. You know what I mean? We're past COVID times now.
Right.
This is like, we're past the capacity. Okay. So that's a lot.
What was the second part, I think?
Well, who gets to go to the perfect earth?
Okay, so if you ask this exact question to a Jehovah's Witness, they'll read you a scripture that says, the meek will inherit the earth.
The meek.
And the meek, yes.
Okay.
So what they will tell you is that everyone who is as sinless as possible, we don't know people's hearts and where they're at. Jehovah will judge that. But, you don't have to be Jehovah's Witness to go to paradise after you die. But
it's better.
All they do is preach about how Jehovah's enemies will be destroyed, and if you're not Jehovah's Witness, you will be killed in Armageddon.
But also they say you could come back.
Correct.
So if you get past Jehovah, like if you go to die and then Judgment Day comes because you go to sleep when you die. I understand you sleep when you die and you don't wake up until Judgment Day.
Correct.
So when you wake up during Judgment Day, it's Jehovah who will judge you.
Correct.
And so if Jehovah says, "Hey Mo, you're not a Jehovah's Witness, but guess what? You've been a good guy. I'm gonna let you go." Is it up to Jehovah, basically?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So they do agree with that.
Okay. You know what? I can deal with that. I mean,
yeah.
come to think about it, you know what I mean? But because I used to think about that when I grew up, the religion my family followed as well. Is like, what if I'm a good person, you know? Okay, so what was the pivotal point for you? Why did you decide, I'm no longer going to do this. This is not who I am.
I mean, I grew up in a pretty good family. I'm not gonna say that I had a terrible family. I had a great family.
Yeah.
You know, everyone was together. They took care of me. We weren't necessarily poor. I did not struggle very early on. So it was more like when I started, thinking for myself and having these critical thinking moments that I started to pull away from the Jehovah's Witnesses and going to meetings. That was the first step, is just not showing up to meetings. And I remember the first time that I really felt that I was questioning the religion was I was in service, right? And I was knocking on someone's door. Thank God this person said what they said, but they said to me, "Didn't Jehovah's Witnesses declare the end of times like 2 or 3 times by now?" And
Somebody said that to you when
oh
you
yeah,
went door to door.
oh yeah, and it struck me as so odd. Why would you say that? Absolutely not. Jehovah's Witnesses haven't done that. And of course, what we do is we are taught to rehearse, scriptures. So we read the scripture. No, only God knows the day. Nobody knows the day or time, nor God. Only God.
Yeah.
So what we did was we rehearsed the scripture. But when I went home, I just had this feeling like, why would he say that? Like, that's so peculiar to me. Because you get all different ranges of kind people and people slamming the door in your face and lots of different ranges, but definitely not so much people who actually want to question you. So I looked it up, and to my amazement, I started looking through like old magazines that would say 1914, the generation that will never pass. And so
How old were you?
I was, I think, 14.
Okay.
So you have a 14-year-old going door to door and trying to convert people, and yet at 14 you don't really know that much about life, let alone religion, and you are trying to go and tell other people how they should join your religion.
When you don't even completely believe it yourself.
Right. You don't have the knowledge that, I mean, you should have really to fully engage and believe in that. And so when I heard that man speak, and I did my own research, and I saw that what I was told, this was all swept under the rug. I had never heard that Jehovah's Witnesses had declared the end of time, 1914, 1975. These things weren't talked about. They were taboo. You don't speak of this because when you bring this up, you're questioning Jehovah. You're questioning the religion. You're questioning the organization.
You're questioning Jehovah, in which really who you're questioning is the organization.
Correct.
Right, because you're saying that the religion and the organization are 2 separate entities?
Not that they're separate, but
I thought you were saying that before, but okay, so what is the difference?
there's definitely a difference. So, Watchtower organization runs the Jehovah's Witnesses religion, right? But the Watchtower organization sets out the rules. There's a group of governing body, right? So there's a group of 7 or 8 men in Brooklyn, New York, who run things. They make the decisions whether, blood transfusion is accepted or not. These are the people who make these decisions. So,
and that's never been changed. That's one thing that
no, that's I mean, this is a really new religion. It's only started in the 1870s. So Yeah, you have a bunch of rich white men sitting in a Brooklyn building making the decisions about whether you're allowed to celebrate your birthday or not, you know?
Wow. Wow. And then nobody really questions it. And if they do question it,
Right.
they end up leaving, really.
So that was the biggest thing for me in the religion, is that you weren't allowed to ask questions because it was frowned upon, because you were questioning Jehovah, because you shouldn't have to question these things. The Watchtower does it for you. So when I would ask my parents a question about, why can't I go hang out with my friends from school? I like this friend. They're a good friend. They're not doing anything bad that you wouldn't disapprove of.
Yeah.
Why can't I do that? What the typical go-to for most of these people is, they go to the Watchtower website and they, almost as if you're reading off a script, here's your answer. Exactly what the governing body had printed. It's a rehearsed little answer, and there's your answer, and don't question it.
Who's the person? Who's the founder?
The founder is Charles Taze Russell.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he was what? Was he a Christian before that? Just to say,
So he was, I think, I'm not entirely sure. I think he was Seventh-day Adventist, I want to say.
Okay.
And basically started Bible studies in his basement. And then I think a few religions actually spun off of his teachings. And then, so he created Jehovah's Witnesses. I think they were originally called Bible Students. And then what happened was Rutherford took over, and he was the president, and they just changed things as they went. So actually, when you actually go back and you look at the things that were printed back then that the founder would have printed, they're actually different from nowadays. And so when you question these people about these discrepancies between the past and now, because they claim to have all the answers, what they'll tell you is the light gets brighter. Knowledge is like light, and it gets brighter. And we didn't know everything back then, but we know more now.
Okay. So, all right. I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, it just seems like, okay, you know what? See, people will listen. Maybe some people will listen and they'll be like, oh, it's just like any other religion, every religion's. But like, I mean, I grew up around quite a few Jehovah's Witnesses, and and I'll be talking, very soon with queer Jehovah's Witnesses and what their experience are like. But I also want to get the heterosexual perspective. However, because I remember not being able to celebrate, stand up for, the national anthem and birthdays, but I also have a friend, I think I told you, who died a little while ago, like 15, 16 years ago, who died because, he was unconscious, and they had to make a decision, and his family decided not to give him the blood transfusion. Now, I've held a lot of resentment, don't get me wrong, which I'm sure you have as well, being a part of it even
definitely
more. So for you, I mean, that's enough about me, but for you, when you were, at what point did you just completely cut ties? Or was it always just gradual? Was there a point where you just said, okay, cutting, that's it, done?
It was gradual. So I guess the biggest thing was Jehovah's Witnesses, at least in my experience, they did not want you to be educated. So they discouraged going to college.
Okay.
Because what they would say is you're taking that time away from serving Jehovah, right?
Yes.
From service work. So what I told myself when I was young, and this was around 14 to 16, I pretty much said to myself, okay, you have some questions, and they hated if people would look on the internet, because what they said is the devil is trying to sway you. Absolutely.
My friend would tell me that. His
devil,
parents would tell me that.
The devil is trying to sway your decisions. So what I said to myself was, if this really is the true religion, the one that actually is right, which what they refer to as the truth, then it should be the truth. There shouldn't be anything that I can read that should be able to sway me, right? Because I have an answer to it, because I already know that this is the truth. And what I found when I actually did my own research online against my parents' wishes was the exact opposite. I found I had 10 times more questions about things that I would never dream of and that I've never even thought. And I just realized that, you know what? No, these people don't have the answers, and they didn't think this through.
How old were you when you finally were just like, this is...
I was 14, I started questioning, and by 16, I had stopped going to meetings.
And your parents were good with that?
We had multiple arguments, and there was lots of tears going, lots of argument, lots of anger, lots of tears, you know, because it's very emotional, because what in their mindset, it's described as like you're taking a blindfold off, because when you come out of that state of living, you feel like you've been blindfolded your whole life. Like you've just been told what to do and you've just been doing it. And it feels like an awakening. It feels like you are literally waking up, because you almost feel brainwashed and you're told to do things a certain way, think a certain way. And if anyone asks you a question, you say what the Watchtower tells you. And so
there's no wavering.
No, absolutely not. And so for my parents, what they obviously think is, here's my son, he's blaspheming God, and he's not going to get into paradise earth, and I'm not going to see him ever again when we die, right?
And they wholeheartedly believe this.
Absolutely.
Your parents, do you mind if I ask you, do you still talk to your parents, your family?
I do, but so this is something that the Jehovah's Witnesses are separated from, let's just say, you know, standard Christianity. So what they do is, if you leave, it depends if you're baptized or if you're unbaptized, but they have this thing called disfellowshipping. So what happens if you leave and you're baptized, you are seen as turning against God, knowing God's teachings, turning against it, and then and some people even speak out against it, which is being an apostate. But basically, you are not allowed to speak to them. So
they excommunicate you
correct.
From the Kingdom Hall.
You are shunned, is what they call it. Shunned.
And they advise that your family does the same, as much as they can.
Right.
So
you are cut off.
You were cut off. So your family chose not to cut you off.
So what happened is I was not baptized. So right around, it's actually quite funny, right around 14, which is the time I was questioning things. They were pushing me, come on, get baptized. In which the test of getting baptized is you having some basic Bible knowledge and then just saying, hey, I want to get baptized. I want to be devoted to God. And that you have to get an elder to approve that. But basically, since I wasn't baptized, I am just seen as what they would refer to as worldly, which is someone who, let's just say off the street, who hasn't been baptized, someone from another religion, they are associated as worldly. So
you know too much.
They
know
are
too
just considered bad association.
Okay. So you weren't baptized, so you didn't get shunned by your family. You still, like, they still talk to you, but it's very minimal. Would you say it's like
correct?
Very minimal.
Minimal.
Okay. Wow.
So it's a little bit different than being disfellowshipped. Disfellowshipped would be absolutely no communication, and well, I guess I'd probably be considered at this point speaking out against the religion as an apostate. So that would be no contact. But I try to keep a relationship with my family. I do love them. They are great people.
Of course, yeah.
And I don't think that religion should be something that separates people. And so I'll always try and keep that relationship. But basically I'm seen as bad association and should be minimal contact. Yeah.
And they follow that, your family.
And they do.
They do. They abide by that.
Right.
So, the other thing I was really curious about is these people who speak out, apostate.
Yeah.
Do they ever get heard? Like, is there other sectors of Jehovah's Witness that go and do their own thing and they're like, we still want to be a part of the religion, but we're not going to do this thing type of thing?
Yeah. There's actually Jehovah's Witnesses that they proclaim they're witnesses of Jehovah, but they do not follow the Watchtower organization.
Oh.
So it's actually, there's lots of different types, but there's also...
So they've sinned, basically. Jehovah's Witnesses. Okay,
right. So
it.
they definitely would not make it into paradise, according to the Watchtower.
Shit. So, I mean, this is all very interesting. Obviously, there's some stuff you're talking about I had no idea, and a lot of it I did know because I grew up, as I said, with friends who were a part of the Jehovah's Witness religion. Now, I know that you're passionate about speaking to young people who are contemplating leaving, right? And there are probably forums on Reddit. I think you were talking about XJWs, who what do you have to say to these people who are left but are kind of trapped in a way?
So, I mean, you can go check it yourself. There's lots of people who come from all different situations. Maybe they're gay and they're stuck in the religion, or maybe they just don't believe. They've had that awakening where they just say, oh, maybe something's not right. Maybe they believe in God, but they don't believe in Jehovah.
Okay.
Right? So there's people from all different backgrounds. And what I notice is there's lots of people that are actually still within the religion, still going to meetings, but do not believe. But they're keeping that persona going because they want to maintain their family. They want to maintain those connections. Because what happened to me was when I left, you lose your family. You are raised not to hang out with other people, like from school, only Jehovah's Witnesses. So all your friends are Jehovah's Witnesses.
So you're groomed.
Your
basically.
whole community is Jehovah's Witnesses. So what happens is when you leave all that behind. They're told not to speak to you, not to hang out with you, not to associate with you. And so a lot of these people who are in these forums that are going to meetings are just trying to maintain those relationships. But yeah.
Because to them it's like if anybody suspects that you're gay or that you're not believing or that you're trying to sway and become worldly, they tell you to pray. Just pray to God. I've been told many times, my friends' parents, still actually up until a few months ago, said you should just pray, Mo, just pray and hope that Jehovah changes you. And there was a whole bunch of things. There's a whole bunch of reasoning for her. She's like, because there's such a high percentage of mental illness in the LGBTQ community. I'm like, there's a high percentage of mental illness in a lot
everywhere.
Of communities. You know what I mean? Like, it was just crazy, the craziness of the statement. And so, my friend's parents were basically atheists. They were Catholics, but they were basically, not believing in anything at one point until somebody came to the door. And, he talked to her. And then I guess statistically speaking, I've heard that, they go for the wife first. They go for the wife and then they go for the rest of the family.
Yeah, that's a tactic, right?
That's a tactic. So, but yeah, so...
so, I mean...
Sorry, go ahead.
So that definitely happens. And I mean...
Do you have to go... How often do you have to go door to door?
It would be... So, what they have is for just your standard Jehovah's Witness, you're going to be going once a week, 2 hours. And what they have is it's called pioneering. So you actually take this on full time. So it's 40 hours is a regular pioneer. I think it's 50 hours is a auxiliary pioneer, and then a special pioneer is 70 hours per
A
week.
week.
Per week, right? So
you don't have a job, basically.
that's what I'm saying. So this is why school was discouraged, because you should be pioneering, not going to college, right? So that is the different levels that you could be pioneering.
I'd be the lazy person. I'd be
Oh,
doing
I
the
know,
10
right?
hours a week. I'd be like, sorry, I'll do 10, you know.
Yeah, I know.
Really, I'll be doing like 3. But, you know, like...
Yeah. Yeah. So you're going door to door, rain or shine, out in the winter. And so what we do is we pair up, 2 people, and then we take turns. And we have a little script. We have rehearse our little jingle, I guess you'd say. And then you have your magazines, and your goal is to get a Bible study at the end of the day.
What do you have to say to people who are questioning leaving, though? Like,
Right.
I want to get back to that question. Like,
Yeah.
what do you have to say? Where would you suggest people go? Like, there's safety. You got through it. I mean, you seem like a pretty level-headed, happy individual. I'm sure you went through some really hard times to get to this place, and you still, I'm sure, some days struggle with it. I don't know if you do, but I'm just assuming
Absolutely.
that you might struggle a little bit at least. Where does somebody go for help? What is it? Should they get help from a therapist? Should they be talking to former Jehovah's Witness friends? Should they get
Right.
on these forums?
So for me, I think a huge part was the internet, definitely.
The devil.
The devil, exactly. The devil was
The
my
devil net.
friend. Oh, the devil net. Yeah. I mean, so I would just, advise against coming out to any Jehovah's Witness, because it might just make the matters worse. But I remember, it was hard for me. It was hard because even when I educated myself to the point where I did not agree with Watchtower, I still wanted to believe in God. And that was, something that was a shift in my mentality, that I thought, I still want to believe in God. I just don't want to accept the Watchtower organization's rules they have in place. And I think that the internet was the biggest resource you could ever have, because there's so much information. There's lots of websites that will actually pick apart the different issues with what the Watchtower organization puts out. There's a book, if you are a Jehovah's Witness and you want to educate yourself on the issues with Watchtower, Crisis of Conscience. It's actually written by a former governing body man that was he was obviously leading the pact in the organization, and he wrote a book called Crisis of Conscience after he realized that how they were doing things was not scriptural. And so he's still a Christian, but he stepped down from his position of being a governing body agent to absolutely being an apostate of Jehovah's Witnesses. And so getting back to your question, I would just say the internet is your friend. Don't be afraid. Do not think that the devil is going to, sway you either way. Be curious, ask questions, be skeptical. There's nothing wrong with asking questions, and it's okay that you don't have all the answers. The biggest thing for me was that I needed an answer, and something you learn when you grow up a little bit is just that you might not have the answer, and that's okay.
And that's okay, because you can absolutely live your life your way, ask the questions that you want, and not feel afraid of doing so.
Right.
Yeah, it makes complete sense, and I think that's a really, that's a really great piece of advice, actually, and I think it's very straightforward. Essentially you have to. It's scary, but I get it. You got to be fearless when you have to do something and know that you might be shunned or people will disown you. It's scary shit, but you have to do it because you know that you need to live for yourself, right?
Yeah. that was definitely the biggest thing, right? You are going to face a moment in time where you have to decide whether to put on a charade and a show and go to a meeting and sit there and hear somebody talk about, basically propaganda versus you actually taking the initiative and pursuing what you actually truly believe, right? And even if you don't have an idea of what you believe, but you disagree with what they're doing, you have to stick to that. You have to, and you will be rewarded because it's such a liberating feeling just doing something that is right for you.
Yeah, you'll be rewarded. That feeling is just rewarding. Not that I'm here trying to promote religion or anything like that, but what would you say was the biggest positive of growing up Jehovah's Witness? Was there any type of, was there anything that came out of this sort of discipline?
Definitely.
Okay.
I would say, so, really, that's why I don't want to say anything really. Not the religion is not necessarily bad, just because they do. They teach some things that I would disagree with, but they also teach to love one another. They also teach let's just say maybe to stay away from drugs, which could that could be a good thing, right? It could be a bad thing. It could be a good thing. They not to be drunk, to take care of your marriage, to do these things, right? And so they have good principles, but what happens is there's a few, bad apples in the batch, and it kind of spoils it, right?
Yeah.
So I definitely grew up with a good moral compass, teaching people, what I thought was right and wrong, and being kind to people, and just having a general good moral compass.
So for me as a gay person, I just gotta pray. They would tell me pray, just don't act upon it. Correct?
Right. So for you as a gay person, they would say that you are just having, a feeling of
Just a feeling.
just a feeling, and that
It's like a hot flash.
You have to resist that your whole life.
It's like a hot flash.
Right,
Just a little feeling, it will pass.
It will pass. It's just a temptation.
wish.
It's the devil tempting you.
Oh man, fuck! I was praying for that when I was a kid too. Like I was like, when will this pass? This is just, and then they fucking 2 years, 3 years,
coming.
4 or 5. They just kept on coming.
Which is also another thing that a lot of the elders of the congregation have been found that they are child abusers and child molesters, and this is something that has been coming out actually. But the issue is that they deal with it internally, right? If someone is, found out that they had relations with a kid or something, they don't bring it to the police. They deal with it internally, and so there's a whole scandal of this coming out now, and it's being brought to light, which is good.
How prevalent is this in the organization?
Well, there's lots of court hearings of elders testifying, saying, I cannot recall, and this is pretty prevalent. So,
and they have to abide by the law. So if the law asks them to come in, they can't be like Jehovah. We know that they're not above the law. They don't believe they're above the law.
Well, they do, because what they do is they deal with it, within the congregation. So if someone was found to be molesting a kid, for example, they don't go to the police. They just talk about it and say, okay, can we fix this, blah, blah, blah.
So the families will know.
They do not go to the police. This is the whole issue behind this, is that they don't report it.
So they okay. So if a family finds out that their child was molested by an elder, however way, they try to internally deal with this. The parents will be like, "You molested my kid."
They're told not to go to the police.
They're like, "It's okay."
Right.
They'll come to terms with it, and we're going to deal with it internally. And what happens to that person, to the elder?
Well, they would either have their privileges revoked, or they pretty much get a slap on the wrist, and then they're back in the congregation. I mean, that's about it, right?
That's for everything, basically.
That's so for serious sins. Basically, what happens is you'll get your privileges revoked, and you'll be on a timeout. And then when it's been a long enough and they feel like, okay, you're sorry, you've repented, then they'll let you back in, and that's it.
When they feel you've repented.
Right.
And then so losing your privileges is basically just not partaking in a meeting.
Not partaking. You just listen, and you don't get to comment. That's about it.
Do you ever, this is going to be my last question before we wrap this up, unless you have something more to say. Do they ever make it back in to the circle, like back into the inn? Like, do they ever get their privileges back? And could somebody who's committed that sin ever be a part of the 144 if they claimed it?
Absolutely. Yep. They basically operate that if you are repentful, and obviously they've decided, enough time has gone by that they see fit that you could be, a member of anything, right? And it's not reported to the police.
So is something like that taken care of within the Kingdom Hall, or is it the governing people who have to come in and...
So each congregation has ministerial servants and elders is what they call them. So they form a group within the congregation, and they speak after meetings, and they get together and talk about, let's just say, if someone has sinned, right? And then they decide what they want to do with them. So they basically would have a conversation. Okay, what are we going to do with this guy? And then the usual standard practice would just be to revoke privileges. You can't give any talks. You can't give any comments.
Okay.
And then, when they see, okay, he's sincere, he wants to be back, he wants to comment, he wants to talk, and he's repented, then yeah, you're in again.
You're in again.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's not so bad for somebody like you who is just questioning. You're like,
Right.
hey, you know what? I need a break. So
Right,
you're like,
right.
this is happening right on time. Anyways, Chris, thank you so much for being on.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome, and thank you for being so open to talking about, your former religion. And for anybody listening, please feel free to contact QueerAtheartPodcast@gmail.com for any questions you may have or any topic suggestions that you'd like to hear on Queer at Heart. Chris, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Ciao.
See you.